ahead and introduce you to our presenters. We are excited to have Carolyn Starks and Michael Walden at Pomona College. They are the Assistant Deans of Admissions, and they have been dedicating their work to diversity recruitment and working with our population, and they're really excited to provide you all with some of the insights that they've learned on the ground. And as I mentioned earlier, we're really excited to bring in Darren Morgan, who's the Executive Director at Arkansas Commitment. And he is going to provide a CBO counselor perspective and providing best practices on how do you navigate those relationships with college admissions. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with our lovely team, and it is all up to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany. My name is Michael Walden. I'm an Assistant Dean of Admissions here at Pomona College and very excited to be here with you all today.
And hi, I'm Carolyn. I'm also an Assistant Dean of Admissions at Pomona College, and we are thrilled to be able to share this insight with y'all and help you understand the admissions process from our side a little bit more.
Okay. So we're going to jump in and kind of do an overview of what this presentation is going to cover. So we're going to start by talking about counselor calls. So how are admission offices using counselor calls in the process, and how can they be beneficial to you all, and what do they actually involve? We're going to talk about site visits. So when admission officers come to your school, or when you and a group of students come to our college campuses, how do you build the best possible relationships and maximize that opportunity when you have a limited amount of time and or resources? In that vein, also talking about early outreach, so how colleges can support your younger students, so in their first or second year, and their preparation for this process and being as competitive as they possibly can. Next, we'll talk about the connections beyond the admissions office, so working with financial aid offices, some student affairs groups, and some departments that can provide some additional support beyond your traditional general admission session and that sort of thing. And then we'll close by talking about our fly-in program. So some institutions, Pomona included, offer fly-in programs for students, and they're generally diversity recruitment tools. But they differ depending on the institution. So we're kind of just going to talk through how we evaluate applicants, what we look for, and how they fit into our overall admission process. We're going to go about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we're going to leave ample time for questions. So we'll get started now by talking about counselor calls. So these are calls with high school counselors. So in the simplest terms, but there are three main versions of counselor calls. The one most people know about is when we've made our decisions and we talk to counselors about what those decisions are before those decisions are released. But there are a couple of different ways that you can develop and strengthen your relationship with colleges through this medium. So I think of this in three different types of counselor calls. The first is a call that you may have with a college before the applications are actually submitted. So before your students are putting together their applications, you may have a call with the college and talk about what they're looking for, and you may have a specific student in mind, and you're like, so Daniel, or whatever the kid's name is, Daniel has these academic metrics, he's involved in these type of things, how competitive potentially could he be? And that's a great opportunity to get a better sense of how your students could potentially fare in the process, and that can be very helpful in determining whether or not students should apply. For example, like say Daniel is looking at Pomona and he has a 20 on the SAT math, and you're having this conversation with me and he's interested in studying biology, I may tell you straight up that it's going to be unlikely that he's going to be admitted at that point because of our academic standard in that particular subject area. So that could be very helpful information to know, not only as you counsel that one student, but other students in the process moving forward. The second type is between when applications are submitted, but before we actually go into committee. And this is a conversation where you may talk with the college about some additional information that you have about your students. We've already read the application, we're curious about the student, and there may be some additional pieces about their impact on the community that you can provide that help us make these very fine decisions. An example I had was with a student or a school in Ohio last year, where we had 2 kids in committee who we wanted to admit, but being that we only admit about 700 students total in our process, there are times where we can only take so many students, right? So we can only take one of the students out of that group of 2. So I had a call with the counselor where I said, what is this student's impact on the community? Who, based on what you know about Pomona, is going to be the better fit? And having an honest conversation about the counselor, about their perspective about these 2 kids. And it's not going to make the decision for us, but it can have influence in that decision. And then the last type is the most notable type, where after committee decisions are released, we will have a conversation with counselors about what those decisions are, and we can actually provide that information for you. So before decisions are released, you can talk to your students about what that is. So we did want to do a short poll, getting a sense of how you all use counselor calls. So if you could just take a moment to answer that so we can get a sense of where you all are with this part of the process. Oh, so we see the responses. So about 55% haven't used counselor calls. 14% say they use it to advocate for students. About 5% say to learn about students' admissions decisions, and about 27% use both A and B. So I would encourage you to think about, like, as your students are applying to these institutions, especially highly selective or selective institutions, that this is a very good tool to use, and it does help you build relationships with colleges as well. So moving forward, as you're thinking about how to maximize opportunities in that regard, this is something good to do.
Yes, so now we're going to talk about site visits and group visits and program support. So this is kind of one of my favorite parts to work with students, and that's why most of us do this work and why we want to get involved. So group visits is when a group of students would come to campus, and typically we have, most institutions will have a form or a kind of tour that will accommodate larger groups. And most people know that, or don't know that there are opportunities for you to build connections outside of the immediate admissions office. We're also really excited about working with students and getting access to us in ways that are outside of the tour. And we are all worried and excited to do kind of essay writing, case studies, college fit workshops in ways that can allow students to see if this institution is something that is for them, or just to use us as a kind of tool to fine tune their application, and just kind of use us in that model as well. There isn't really an ideal time to visit. It really matters on what you all are looking for and what your students are looking for in that time. I think it's really helpful to understand the cycle of admissions. Like if your students are really interested to connect with their admissions officer, if they're really excited to kind of see the hustle and bustle of students, it's important to know, obviously, the cycle of the college's cycle, but also our cycle as well. So if you're looking to connect with your admissions officer, coming in the fall might be kind of tricky because we are out traveling and recruiting students and not typically on campus. If you're looking to see students on campus, coming in the summer might not work out because our students are limited and they're off campus doing their summertime. So it really does depend on what you're interested in. I also think it depends on what group of students you're thinking to bring to campus. If you're thinking of bringing seniors and kind of having them this be their last final introduction or kind of a view of the campus before they make that final decision to hit submit on that application, that could be a good time to get one last chance in. But if you're working with younger students, it could be really helpful to come in the spring so that they could have some time to see what these colleges are looking for in their applicants and help them kind of prepare to get their applications ready in the summertime and kind of get the advice that they need to be successful in the application process for the institutions that they're looking at. And so we will utilize what y'all are looking for, and that can help us inform how we can serve your students. We also want to, again, like I said, be helpful. And so it's important that your students know the right questions to ask. And I think this comes down to you all knowing what is important to your students. So if they're interested in going to an institution that meets 100% of need or know that they will need a lot of financial aid to be able to go to college, asking those questions about what does the financial aid process look like? Is it merit-based? Is it a first come, first served basis, or is it need-based? So making sure your students understand the kind of questions that are important to them. In terms of diversity, making sure that those students ask the kind of questions of what kind of support is available for first generation to college students? What kind of support is available for students who are coming from far away? Are there ways that I can feel like and make this community my home? And how can I, again, navigate this space and be successful mentally, emotionally, physically, and making sure they have those kinds of things. So making sure your students understand, one, what is important to them, because a college is more than just your major that you're choosing. And I know that we get a lot of questions of what kind of majors are offered, and that is wildly important because you're coming to get an education in that. But again, the holistic review of what your college experience is going to be is important to asking those questions is vital as well. And then webinars. This is what we're doing right now, and I think a really wonderful opportunity for you as counselors to be educated, but then to also be able to share this information with your students if there aren't funds to get y'all to the different institutions that you're looking at. So being able to see virtual tours, I know a lot of schools these days are on something called UVisit, which is a virtual tour where they have different stops, and you actually have a tour guide that pops up in the corner of your screen and gives you a virtual tour. It is a little bit more holistic than just like a YouTube video because there is an opportunity for there to be an additional media. So you can see kind of little blurbs that institutions want to see and have visual to their students who are unable to make it to campus. So making sure that you kind of understand that they're getting to campus, there are different ways than just knowing what it's like to be on our campus.
So we have another poll very quickly, just to get a sense of how you feel about the current state of your visit. So let's take a moment to just answer that really quickly. Okay, and most of you said that you're satisfied so far. So those of you who are not satisfied, if you could respond in the chat for what you wish was a little bit different or what you wish could happen, or even those that are satisfied, if there are things that could be made better, that would be really helpful information for us as well. But thank you for that poll. And now I think Darren is going to take the next slide.
All right, so I think I'm unmuted this time.
Yeah, we can hear you. We're gonna mute ourselves now so we don't mess you up.
Perfect. All right, so next I'm going to talk about collaboration during travel season. So during travel season, admissions counselors are coming to your city in flocks, trying to spread the good news about their college to as many students as possible. You can help them out by placing them in front of as many students as possible. And that may mean, if you're on the CBO side, reaching out and partnering up and collaborating with other CBOs in your area. One thing that I like to do with the Arkansas Commitment here in Little Rock is for our annual college symposium, which is normally just a small college fair in the past, and only had about 50 of our senior students within our cohort and a handful of colleges. But we wanted to increase the number of students and increase the number of colleges that we had, so we actually reached out to local area churches, other high schools, and collaborated so we can bring as many students as possible. So what started at a small event now has about 500 students and about 14 colleges annually. And you can really help colleges out by increasing the number of students that they meet with. And what that will do in turn is really increase the chance that they're going to continue working with your organization. So please be sure for college nights, symposiums, go ahead and spread the wealth and spread the resources to other programs and resources in your community. As far as summer workshops and building continuity and program support, college recruitment season doesn't have to be confined just to the fall. Take advantage of the downtime in admissions. So things like late spring after decisions go out and summer events would be great to host events for younger classes. So 9th and 10th graders, and Mike is going to talk about the 5-4 rule a little bit, but take advantage of building those off-season events when admissions is a little bit slower because they're not recruiting, they're not reading apps, and you really have that chance to build that relationship with institutions and your organization. We can move to the next slide. All right, so next up is really about setting up each other for success. So it's sort of a quick list of best practices to help counselors help you serve your students a little bit better. A couple of things, so be flexible and accommodating. So be sure to place the admissions counselor in a successful position. Consider what type of environments are most effective for representatives to give a 30 to 45-minute presentation. For some colleges, cafeteria visits may be convenient for your high school, but they may not be the most productive and effective for that admissions counselor. Classroom visits, counselor office visits, study halls, and after-school meetups may be better environments for recruiters to speak about their college to your students without yelling over a large crowd. Be transparent about your students and be open about your students. Before the admissions counselors begin to interact with your kids, feel free to open up and tell them what demographic they're working with. If you have, please share a high school profile with the admissions counselor that will show things like average graduation rates, ACT and SAT scores, AP and IB enrollment rates, and average GPA of your students. And that's really going to allow the admissions counselor to cater their message to your students. And what that will do in turn is help your students know at a younger age that these are the steps that they need to take in order to get into their dream school. Go in depth for your students. For students like, for instance, in my demographic, the students that I work with that may be first generation or underrepresented students, regardless of grade level, this may be their first encounter ever working with an admissions counselor. As a result, they may feel a little bit nervous or intimidated, and they may not know the right questions to ask or what questions to ask about the college as far as majors or resources or affinity groups on campus. So feel free to dive in for your students and ask those questions on their behalf. At this point in the game, they may not know what they don't know. So you being the professional jumping in for them will definitely help them out and give them information they may not be able to get otherwise. And the last point is be comfortable making requests. If you have certain things that you want the admissions counselors to tackle on, if you want them to reiterate some points that you've been making all year and you feel like it's just not connecting with your students and you want someone from a college or a dream school to reiterate that point for you, feel free to make that request to that admissions counselor. Feel free to take advantage of that time you have with that professional and guide that conversation if need be. And the last point is the earlier the better, and I think Mike is going to cover that one.
Carolyn's going to jump on that one.
Yes. Thanks for that transition, Darren. So early outreach is vital to making sure that the students understand how to be a competitive applicant for the schools that they're looking at. What's really nice about working with younger students is they have time. They have time to create themselves and really explore the different ideas or classes or activities that they're interested in. For selective institutions or highly selective institutions, the most rigorous curriculum, which Sharon mentioned a little bit earlier, is the 5-4 rule, meaning that we would like 4 years of the 5 solids. And those solids are English or language arts, history or social science, natural science, math, and foreign language. We understand that some of your students may be rock stars in math or English or a foreign language, so they may, what we call max out, mean they take the highest offered curriculum at your school, so they may take Calc BC in their junior year. We understand that they have maxed that out. So we will see, okay, they can backfill that open slot of that other math in their senior year with another solid that they're interested in. So making sure that they have those 4 years of those 5 solids. And that is something that is really, really important to us to see that they're pushing themselves and taking that the rigorous curriculum. We also like to see rigorous curriculum in the sense of APs and honors and IBs if they're offered at your school. So we understand that some institutions will offer the entire IB curriculum, or some schools won't offer any honors at all. So it's our job to know your schools really well and know what the rigorous curriculum is at your institution. So that is very important for us to, again, have that relationship with you to say, we don't have any honors, but this student has done everything that they can to push themselves intellectually in the capacity that I know schools are looking for. The extracurricular and yeah, of course.
And another quick point on the 5-4 rule is that we recognize also that not every school is going to have 4 years of each academic discipline too. So like we see it a lot with foreign languages where the school may only go up to like Spanish 2 or French 2. So knowing that is important. And it doesn't always show up on the application for a student. So another way that you can be really helpful for us is if you know that's the case with the student's curriculum, is letting us know that information either in your letter or making sure that that information is on the profile, because we do evaluate that curriculum semester by semester, year by year, to understand how a student has challenged themselves across the different disciplines. So that information is really key.
Yes, thank you for that. And then the extracurricular involvement expectations. So at institutions like Pomona, we are a residential institution, so our students are going to be living on campus and interacting with students who are already here, plus the incoming students with their first year class. And so it's important that they really invest in themselves, but also invest in this place that they're going to call home for the next 4 years. And we want to see that through their extracurricular involvement. Now, we like to see breadth and depth, and by that I mean if a student joins 3 or 4 clubs in their first year and they only stick with about 1 or 2 of them, we know that they're evolving across the 4 years that is their high school career. So we're not looking for you to be, or for students to be involved in 5 or 6 things all 4 years. We understand that they may pick up interests and they may drop interests. We just want to see that they are doing something outside of their class, and so that they can interact and engage with the Pomona community or whatever community that they join. So it's important for them and for us, especially at residential institutions, to see that engagement at large. And this demonstrated interest is building benefits. It's building relationships with the college outside of their application, prior to their application. And one thing that I like to say is it's rather demonstrated understanding rather than demonstrated interest. And what I mean by that is if your student emails us and they say, I'm really interested in your psychology department, what's that like? I more likely than not will say, this is what our psychology department is like, and here I'm going to hyperlink the website to our psychology department. But when a student asks me, I've done some research, I have looked at this psychology class, and this professor that is doing this research sounds wildly interesting to me because I've done this, or I have an interest in that, that is where we as admission counselors get to engage more in depth with and have a conversation with, rather than just pointing students to different websites or professors. So that's where they can have, again, more of a dialogue with us. And so understanding the institution and not just expressing interest is something that we like to see, and actually will make a student more memorable for us because we're having a conversation rather than just, again, directing them to a different part of the website.
If I can jump in on that piece as well. When it comes to demonstrating interest, make sure your students are taking advantage of the times when the admissions counselors are in your city. So if they're coming to your city for college fairs or school visits, especially if they're down the hall, if they say they're interested in school, make sure that they're going and taking the time to go meet with the counselors at those places. Meeting them on the road, special programs at the institution. And I know at times travel can add up and be expensive, and that's when those fly-in programs really come in hand, when the schools will actually provide funds for students to come visit.
Is that me? Mm-hmm. This is also a wonderful opportunity to go back to when you come to campus and what it looks like to engage with the college as a whole. So for students who are looking to apply for financial aid, know that the financial aid offices are wonderful people, and they are excited about working with and educating prospective students just as much as they're working with our current students. We want to make places accessible, and we want to make sure that all students from all different socioeconomic backgrounds feel like institutions are attainable. So working with financial aid offices on and off campus is really important. And there are some financial aid offices who will travel with admissions offices depending on the different markets that they're going to. So sometimes I know schools will go to bigger cities and they'll have an admissions officer and a financial aid officer there when they have larger programs outside of the school visit, if they're having like an event that is open to the city at large. This is also an opportunity for you to build a relationship with a student affairs office, because once students come to campus, as much as we love working with them, we kind of hand them off to student affairs. So understanding the kind of, again, support that is available is really important in connecting with those offices. What's really important there to note is that the student affairs offices are focused on working with students who are already on campus. So the programming might be limited, but you should reach out, again, going back to what Darren was saying, reach out. It never hurts to ask. So understanding they're focused on students currently on campus, but they're also really excited to highlight the support that different institutions are offering, because that is what makes these schools special and unique. And then understanding the roles of community engagement. So most institutions that are similar to Pomona are really invested in the community that they're in, because again, we are a residential institution, so the students will be living and breathing on our campus, but if you move off campus, they'll be a part of the Claremont city or whatever city that they're in. So we are, and our current students are invested in giving back. So if you're interested in working with a university or college that's in your backyard, they might have programs that already exist where they will have students that can come and work with the students depending on what you're interested in or what you're trying to do. So making sure that you build those relationships with the schools that are immediately in your vicinity as well, because again, there might already be programs that exist that can help students better understand those institutions that are right there in your backyard.
And so before we move on to talking a little bit about fly-in programs, we have a little poll that we'd like you to fill out real quick. So just take a moment to respond to this poll that popped up for you. If you do have additional feedback that you want to provide on your experience or perspective on fly-ins, please just send questions to the chat as well. All right. Cool. So most people want to hear about all these different pieces. Yeah, so these are some things that we're going to look into right now. And it's geared mostly towards the Pomona fly-in. So we offer a fly-in program. and we bring out about 120 students in the fall for 2 different programs. So 60 for a first weekend program and 60 more for a second weekend program. And a lot of programs around the country are moving to this model where the applications are a little bit earlier. And part of the reason that we do that is because we want to have our programs earlier. At Pomona, we try to have our programs before students select schools for QuestBridge Match, because we are a QuestBridge partner school, and we want to make sure that those students that are applying for QuestBridge have all the information that they need before they start determining who's going to receive their application and how they want to rank schools. So that's one of the reasons our timing is as it is, but you'll find fly-in programs across the fall and some even in the spring for different students. A lot of the applications are taking place in the summer, or the deadlines are happening in the summer when offices are closed, or your counseling offices are closed. One of the things that we're doing to try to make it more accessible is allowing students to self-report a lot of their materials. So their grades and their courses and their test scores, their entire academic record, they're able to actually self-report that information. The caveat to that is that if they're admitted to our programs, we do ask that they submit either unofficial or official documents once their school opens. And I'll talk a little bit more about why we do that in just a second. But we're trying to do that to give students more of an opportunity to apply to different programs, even though those deadlines are when your offices are closed. We usually send out invitations in May, early June. There are some schools that send out nomination forms from counselors for you to nominate students for their programs. And that usually takes place in February or March or earlier in the year. But a bulk of this work is done in the summertime, where you may not be in close connection with your students. So knowing what schools your students are interested in, what schools have fly-in programs as well, could be very helpful. So any feedback also that you have on the communications that you're receiving from schools could be helpful for us to understand as we're planning things for years moving forward. As far as the evaluation goes, the application for our fly-in programs provides much less information than a full application for admissions. So we're just going to get a student's like grades and courses, their testing, and then usually a short, like 250 or 300 word essay, as well as some background information. So it's far less information than we get in a full application. So the primary thing that we're going to look at is going to be the academics for a student. So that's going to be a major determining factor in whether or not a student is admitted to the flying program, is their academic work. So we do this because we want to make sure that students, if we're going to invest in them, fly them out to campus, that they are, at the end of the day, potentially admissible. These are students that we're bringing out to campus that we want to admit. That is our goal, is to eventually admit the students that we fly out to our campus. So we try to have a lens when we're reading the fly-in application as to, is this student going to be competitive if they apply in the larger pool? So when we're talking about students in committee, we are trying to project, is this student going to be competitive, knowing what we know about our admissions pool. So our conversations are really centered about the future possibility for this student's viability as a candidate. When we talk about doing self-reported information, integrity is really important. At Pomona, we moved to self-reported materials a year and a half ago, or 2 cycles ago. And we did have a couple of students who the information they provided through the fly-in application was different than what was submitted once they then applied to the school. And sometimes lower grades, sometimes different courses, different testing. It doesn't happen frequently, but when it does, that's usually an automatic denial or withdrawal of their application. Because integrity and character is an important consideration. So if it is determined that a student has lied on their materials, we do look up at that as like a bad thing in our pool. And also their behavior on the fly-ins is something that we consider in the application process. So when they actually come to campus, how they connect with students, how they connect with faculty and staff that they interact with, They do an interview while they're here on campus. That all goes into the conversation of their application as a whole. So we do consider all those pieces to try to build a good case for why a student should be admitted to the college. But then we also, if they haven't behaved well, that is something that could be negative on their application too. So talking to them about what the fly-in experience is going to be like before they come can be a very important and helpful thing for you to do with them as well. So now let's take a quick look at some of the stats at Pomona. So last year, we had 10,245 applications. We admitted 780 students, and our enrolled class wound up being 412 once the fall began. And so we are a very, very small school. And the fly-in programs that we have 2 in the fall, and then 2 in the, actually 3 in the spring for admitted students, are a big part of our recruitment. So you can see down below, we had just under 1,000 applications last year. We admitted 150 students and had 114 actually attend the program. Of those 114, 87 of them applied for admission in different rounds. And you can see down there below, most applied during regular decision, but a number applied through QuestBridge, Early Decision 1, and Early Decision 2. And like I mentioned before, we want to admit these students. So we're trying to identify them from the fly-in, from the perspective that we want to see them in our pool and we want to eventually see them on our campuses. So that's why you see that acceptance rate last year was 73.5% for the students that attended our fall fly-in program and were eventually admitted to the class. Of those 64 students that were admitted, 28 actually matriculated. So we usually wind up somewhere between 25 and 35 students who from our fall fly-in program eventually end up in our class. So it is a significant part of our community. And down there at the bottom, you'll see of the proportion of students that apply to the college as a whole, those students that attend POP or apply from POP programs makes up a very, very minuscule number. But in terms of our admitted students, in terms of our enrolled class, they are a pretty healthy population on our campus. So these are very important aspects of our cycle as a whole.
Now, this last page is kind of an opportunity to see the different resources that are out there for you to learn about, for you and your students to learn about the different happenings on our campus. So that is a hyperlink to the College Greenlight summer programs list. So what Darren was mentioning earlier about getting your students to campus, some of them might be academic programs, some of them might be opportunities for just like a group visit, and some of them are tailored to different academic areas. So for students that are interested in those kinds of things. And that's a nice segue into the bottom of the Pomona column. You can see the Pomona College Access for Youth Success. So this is a really wonderful opportunity for students to come to campus as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and to see what it's like to stay on Pomona's campus. You get to take classes and do research with Pomona professors, but then there are also opportunities in workshops where the admissions office and the financial aid office will tell students how to best prepare for the application process. Yes, there can be some information tailored to Pomona, but this is an opportunity for students to really understand the application process at large. This is also, I forgot to add this to the slide, but a great way for students to find schools that are interesting to them. There's the College Board Big Future link where students can go and add different criteria. If they know that they want to stay in the Midwest, or if they want to go to a small school or a co-ed school or a single-sex school, and you can go and they can put different information and qualifications that they have about that, and that's a really great opportunity as well. Switching back to the College Greenlight column, there's a list for the fly-in programs, and that is for all the different institutions that are College Greenlight partners, and you can see what schools offer them, when they're offering, and the deadline for those. And then you can go to them and see the different community organizations. So you can connect with other CBO officers like Darren or other officers in your area to kind of see what they're doing, how they can be creative, and how y'all can build with one another to see, oh, this is a really wonderful opportunity. I didn't know you could do something like that. So great opportunities for you to connect, different opportunities for you to have a better understanding of Pomona specifically. There's also one that Mike really likes to talk about, and that's the college essay guy. And this is a great opportunity for students to see what a college application essay looks like, tips and tricks to be unique, if you will, or to best share your story or your students' lived experience. And then there's also Unigo, which is a scholarship website that will help students find different scholarships available across the country at different schools so that they, again, have the opportunity to attend the institution that they're interested in and not let finances be a barrier.
And just a quick note on PAYS, our program that we host. That's for local students, so students in the Inland Empire, Southern California area. And there are a lot of colleges that have similar programs that are either focused on local students or focused more nationally. But that is a great avenue to check out, and it's a great resource for students as well. So now, I think we have some time for questions, but I thank you all for listening so far and hope this has been helpful.
Yes, perfect. All right. So this is a time for you all to please ask our wonderful team questions. You can ask the questions in the question box using the GoToWebinar platform. All right, team, our first question. What kinds of contact from students is annoying or not helpful?
I would say from my perspective, the questions that you could easily find on the website or find on sources, like when students are trying to connect with offices and they're just like, what's your average GPA? What's your average test score? Do you have this program? And a lot of times it's like that's information that's readily available. And a lot of times we're just copying, pasting links and sending them off to students. So I don't think it's a good use of time on either end. But if they have read this information and then have further questions, or just like, oh, if my GPA is a little bit lower than this, or if I'm interested in this program, do you read applicants differently? Or so just taking the extra step with questions with some students can be helpful. So I would say, like, as students are becoming interested in schools, like that preliminary research they can do and finding out the information that's readily available first before they reach out to officers is a good practice.
If I can jump into that one, when it's constant as well, but it doesn't show any changes to the application. A lot of times kids will just email you and show that they're interested in the school, but those type of contacts are only relevant if it's showing me something that's an improvement on the application or something I can actually be useful in the committee process. Yeah.
And keep in mind also, like, most of us are in this profession. I wouldn't say all of us, because some of us are like extreme introverts and don't want to talk to anybody. But like most of us are in this profession because we genuinely want to work with students. And we're excited when we hear from them. We're excited when we meet them in person. So them just being genuine in their approach and being like, hey, I like this school, or I'm curious about this, I'm curious about this, that can usually lead to a very fruitful conversation. So I know it can be nerve-wracking for a lot of students, or a little bit intimidating for a lot of students, because they may not have ever had a conversation like this. But even if they are asking some of those simple questions, like, one, we're going to respond, but two, it could lead to some other conversations. So I would say, as you're advising students on how to approach that, have them just like fully lean in and just like, yeah, take a look at some of the information that's online, and then reach out to the person that's on the website that's connected to your area.
Perfect. If a student is not accepted into a fly-in program, does that mean they likely aren't going to be admitted, or should we still encourage them to apply?
Great question. Great question. The acceptance rate for students that are not admitted to our fly-in programs who apply to the college and get in is about the same as the overall acceptance rate to the school. So here at Pomona, we're a highly selective institution, and for students that are not admitted to the fly-in program, it does not automatically mean that they're not going to get in. Sometimes we'll deny a student from our fly-in program because we want to know some more information. Like I said before, the application does not give us as much information as we get in the full review when they're applying to be students at the school. So there, you've all probably heard holistic admission so many times by now. We look at everything in the process, and there may be stuff in their essays, in their involvements, in the letters of recommendation, because we don't get any letters of recommendation in the fly-in applications. There are all these different pieces of information that we get in the full application that are going to paint a much more robust picture of that student. So there are a lot of pieces that we learn in the full application that allow students to be admitted that we just didn't have in the fly-in application. There are also moments where we may see potential in a student, but we need more information. So one in particular, last year, he was from Cass Tech in Detroit, and he applied to our fly-in program, and he didn't have a lot of guidance. So he was doing okay academically, but his senior year was the first year that he was taking a hefty amount of AP courses, and he had good test scores. His writing was okay, but we weren't sure how he was going to perform, and we would hate that we would fly him out and then he doesn't perform well in the fall and we have to eventually deny him. So we wanted to see how his first semester grades were, and we denied him from the fly-in. He wound up doing really well first semester senior year, and then we admitted him to the class as a full applicant. So there's situations like that as well where we just need some more information. So we do keep that in mind as well when we're looking at that, the decisions that we're making. But it is not a full denial of at the school when a student is not admitted to the fly-in program.
Thank you. How often would you say a counselor call held around the time of committee has actually moved the needle for a kid from likely denied to, well, maybe I need to rethink this kid and push a little harder for them?
I think it's a very unlikely from them to move from a likely deny to a maybe we're going to admit them or something like that. If it's going to be a deny, generally there are very strong reasons why, and we have that documented in the record and everything. A lot of times we are talking to counselors about why we're making the decisions we are, more so than just changing. I would say where the influence takes place is when we're kind of on the fence about what we're trying to do, which does happen sometimes. And that's where sometimes we'll actually reach out to counselors and say, oh, we have this question about their curriculum, or we're trying to understand this about the student. And that's where the needle can be moved a little bit. But it's generally only when students are on the fence already. It's not going to be like they're already in this camp, we've made the decision, and then a counselor call brings them back. That's not going to be really the circumstances. But it's also going to be important to have a good relationship with that counselor. So between the counselor and the admission office, the relationship does matter as well. So your ability to just like hop on the phone with somebody, we're more likely to have a good conversation if we've already met or like had that type of relationship already. So that's where the relationship building does come into play very strongly as well.
Yeah, and I would like to add, for institutions that track demonstrated interest, it could be really, really helpful for the school, depending on the school, for you all to be candid and say this is the student's number one choice, and that can also help the admissions officers make the decisions that they need to. But that is a school by school basis.
And the other thing to keep in mind as far as decisions is we're never making these decisions just in a vacuum on our own. Anything that we want to do does have to be evaluated and approved by a committee of people. So we may really love a student too, and they could also get denied. So it is a part of this larger plan and how we're shaping a class of students to come to the institution. And that's why like trying to build these relationships is important for us too, because like the more information we have about students, the better off they are in the process.
Right.
So when we're talking about curriculum, when we're talking about their engagement in the community, or lack of engagement in the community, like if there's a reason why that is, or if there's a reason why there was a drop in grades and all we see is the drop in grades. So like information can come from you that can change our perspective on what that drop actually means. So that's where the influence and that's where the information really becomes very impactful, is making sure that they have as full an application as possible.
Thank you, team. And I think we're going to be wrapping up. This is going to be our second to last question. So what is the best way for CBOs to advocate for specific students who are applying to your school? We've gotten a lot of questions that want to clarify, are counselor calls specifically for high school counselors, or is it for CBOs? And where do the CBOs come into play?
That is a great question. We do counselor calls with CBOs as well. So that is something that can be done, and there are, depending on your location or the nature of your CBO, you may have a specific counselor that's assigned to that organization because it's in their state or it's in their territory. So that is something that we welcome also. Advocating for your student as a CBO counselor, that is something that we would love to see as well. Because a lot of times you are seeing the students in a different environment, you know different information about them than their high school counselor, or maybe they go to a school where the counselor has a caseload of 300, 400 kids, but your CBO is a little more intimate. So you have this information. So if they're in a CBO, I think one of the things that's really important too is that make sure you submit a letter for those students as well. So having a recommendation letter from CBOs is important. But also, like, if you have a group of students that you know apply to a college, like, by all means, do counselor calls. Or if you're curious about how a college evaluates applicants, like, by all means, reach out to that college and kind of lead this the same way that a high school counselor would. So we do welcome that as well. And we do actively try to connect with other CBOs. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we made the decision to partner with Greenlight, is to get in closer contact with a lot of CBOs around the country. I'm not sure if Darren, on your side, you have anything to add to that as well.
Yeah, I think you were spot on. One other thing I would add, though, is with CBOs, one thing that really helps the admissions office out as a former admissions counselor is knowing more about the actual CBO, the type of students that you're working with, the demographic that you're working with, the caliber of students that you're working with, because there's a lot of grassroots CBOs out there that's working with a lot of different kids and a lot of different talents. So make sure that you're able to highlight the talents of your kids and advocate for them as far as the community that they're coming from and maybe the background that they're coming from, to help serve your admissions counsel and let them understand who exactly this kid is and how they're different from others in the schools.
Yeah, and in that regard, there are some CBOs that have CBO profiles the same way high schools have profiles, and that often is very helpful information to have.
And I actually wanted to add, for College Greenlight, all of our organizations that we work with and are registered on College Greenlight is provided a complimentary CBO profile that you can have access to, you can update, and you can print it out. So if you needed to send a link to a college in an email, you can do that. Or make sure that you guys update your CBO profiles. Those are included in our directory, and we do share it with our 190 partners like Pomona. Okay, and our last question is, how can our counselors get in touch with you all?
Yeah, so calling, emailing, identifying who's your regional rep, I think would be the first step. And then if you don't know that person, like introducing yourself, maybe sending a profile and talking about a little bit about your students so the rep can understand your school a little bit more. But just doing that outreach on your end for institutions that your students may be curious about or that you've identified as a school that has very good resources or would be a good opportunity for folks. So I would say, yeah, just that simple way.
Yeah, and I think we are willing and excited to connect with you all just as much as we're willing and excited to connect with your students. And we are here at Pomona really opening up ourselves to be a place of learning. So I know, for instance, this past year we worked with a couple of high school counselors who were interested in committee-based evaluation, and they actually came to campus and sat in on two admissions officers and saw what that looked like. So, you know, use us as a place to educate yourself on other things outside of the institution to really understand what it's like on this side of the table. And we're excited again to work with you all in that capacity as well.
And question for Darren in the same topic area. So from being that you worked in admissions and also now on the CBO side, do you notice a best way to reach out to folks in your experience at Arkansas Commitment?
Yeah, the best way is really just through phone calls and emails. With every email that I send out, I try to attach my organizational profile so that the admissions counselors will know who my organization is, what my organization is, and how many students I'm working with and the caliber of the students. And just attach a quick introduction, and that way the colleges will know who we are and how to get in contact with me and my students when they do come to town.
All right, thank you, everyone. So if you like this webinar, we are hosting more webinars. Northeastern University is talking about cooperative learning and how it shapes social impact and capital for first-generation low-income students. That webinar is going to be February 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. All of our counselors are invited. Please look out for a registration email from us shortly. All right, we also have our online scholarship marathon. This is a fan favorite. It will be held Saturday, February 23rd between 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. All of our high school and college students are invited. It is online at College Greenlight. And we're asking students to tell us the progress that they've made in the search and application process. So for every completed scholarship, college, FAFSA application, students will be entered in a chance to win up to $100 every hour. So this is a really great instant gratification reward for students for just putting in the effort. So if you guys are interested in participating, please type scholarship in the chat box or email us at info@collegegreenlight.com. If you guys are hosting any office hours or programming on that Saturday and you want to host a marathon yourself on that day, we are also awarding counselors $50 for participating and encouraging their students to work on their scholarships. All right. Most important question. Do you guys have your students on College Greenlight? If not, this is the perfect time to get them to set up their account. This is scholarship season. We have an amazing scholarship database that identify local and national scholarships and really helping our students identify low-hanging fruit opportunities that will fund their education. If you guys need any additional support, please contact our team at info@collegegreenlight.com. And if you want a refresher on Greenlight scholarship tools, please type training in the chat box or email us at info@collegegreenlight.com. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. I wanted to applaud Pomona and Arkansas commitment for taking your time out to join us. So I will leave you guys with that. And thank you, Carolyn, Michael, and Darren.
Cool. Appreciate you all.
Bye.
It was a pleasure.
All right, signing